Hello everyone, and welcome to the short demonstration on the anatomy of the pterygopalatine fossa. Just firstly, remember, where is the pterygopalatine fossa? It is a small pyramidal shaped space on the side of the skull that looks like an upside down teardrop. And when you are looking through that teardrop, you are actually looking through this window into the space that is the pterygopalatine fossa. But when you open up that window, inside that space, there is actually a lot that is going on that it's almost like a station, like a train station, where you have structures entering and exiting, and through that you have structures that is directed to other areas that is connected to the pterygopalatine fossa through different openings or gateways. So we are on the side of the skull, just medial or deep to the infratemporal fossa. Right, so just for some orientation in this model, this will be our anterior surface. This is lateral. There we have posterior surface, our roof, our floor. And then while looking through this pterygopalatine fossa, you will see the medial wall, that blue there. Right. So this demonstration will only focus on the borders and the openings or the gateways that connect this fossa to other spaces or areas in the skull. So let's firstly look at our walls. What you see here laterally, it's actually not really a wall because laterally the wall is absent. The pterygopalatine fossa just has this window through this V-shaped slit or this fissure called pterygomaxillary fissure, and that communicates to the infratemporal fossa. So I'm going to remove that just to help you identify and orientate the other walls and spaces of this fossa. So all the yellow that you could see is part of the sphenoid bone. So the sphenoid bone will form part of the roof and the posterior wall. So specifically from the greater wing of the sphenoid, we have a part that bends medially inwards, and that will form the infratemporal surface, which extends further deeper into the skull, continuing to also form the roof of the pterygopalatine fossa. And then posteriorly, you will have your lateral pterygoid plate, which is also part of the sphenoid bone, that forms part of the posterior wall of this fossa. And then medially, the blue that you see there, that is the perpendicular plate of the palatine bone. And that plate extends from the bony palate upwards vertically towards the orbit. And you see this perpendicular plate passing medial as the medial wall of the pterygopalatine fossa. Then anteriorly, the purple that you see there, that is formed by the posterior surface of the maxilla. You can also call it the infratemporal surface because it does from the posterior wall, the anterior wall of the infratemporal fossa, but a bit deeper in this posterior surface of the maxilla also forms the anterior wall of the pterygopalatine fossa. And then lastly, the floor, which you don't really see through the window because of that V-shaped fissure, but the floor is formed by a small part of the palatine bone as well, the pyramidal process of palatine bone. Right, and then you can see in each of these walls there are one or more openings that communicates through these openings to different parts, different spaces in the skull. So let's maybe do our anterior one first. Anteriorly, through that anterior wall, we have our inferior orbital fissure that will communicate anteriorly with the orbit. Then medially, what you can see in that medial wall, that opening that you see there, that is known as the sphenopalatine foramen, and that communicates medially towards the nasal cavity. Posteriorly, you have three openings. The superior opening, the largest one that we have here, That is the foramen rotundum that communicates to the middle cranial fossa, and just below that you will have your pterygoid canal, much smaller, tiny little canal, also all the way from the middle cranial fossa. Then what I have indicated inferior to them, although it is a canal that will project slightly more medial, that is the palato-vaginal canal, which communicates a bit more medially to the nasopharynx. Then through the floor, we have our greater palatine and two lesser palatine foramina or canals that will form long canals that will pass all the way to the oral cavity. And then lastly, laterally, we have our window, that V-shaped pterygomaxillary fissure through which this fossa communicates laterally to the infratemporal fossa.